In the depths of a cave, just out of sight behind a large rock, sat a nest. Inside the nest rested 3 eggs wrapped in the fur of their mother while she slept as their father watched over them with a tender gaze. The 2 Pokemon had tried for quite a while now to have eggs, and yet they never seemed to have any luck until now. His gaze focusing on his mate sleeping peacefully with their eggs, he felt calm. Her orange pelt rose and fell with her breathing as her fluffy yellow tail wrapped around the eggs until its tip almost touched her nose, closing the protective circle the Flareon made instinctually around them, her energy long exhausted. Her mate stood up on his blue paws, slim tendrils from what looked like a bow around his neck, trailing around his paws as he made his way over and touched his nose to her cheek. "You did great, Blight." Laying down next to her, he curled himself up against her back, resting his chin on her shoulder as he gazed at the 3 eggs a while longer. When his eyes finally started drifting shut to the sound of Blight's even breathing in such a peaceful atmosphere, he began considering names for the 3 unhatched Eevees. As the sun began to peek over the horizon the next morning, the sound of thundering footsteps echoed in the cave, startling Blight awake. Having just had her eggs, she was in full-blown protective mode, as her fur fluffed up more than normal, and she scrambled to her paws to put herself between her eggs and the intruders. As she did so, she called out to her still groggy mate in a hushed voice. "Chrome! Chrome, wake up! Someone is coming, and fast!" As her voice finally brought him to his senses, the shiny Sylveon leapt to his paws and let out a growl at the group of 3 that rounded the corner, each with a golden badge that, should they have been out under the sun, would have glimmered spectacularly. The leader of the 3 stepped forward, picking up his badge that sat on a leather strap around his neck in his hand and holding it out towards the 2 as he said, "My name is Tracker, and I am the leader of Team Respite. My companions and I have come to apprehend you both. Chrome, King of Deception, and Blight, Queen of Evasion, it is time for you 2 to face your wrongdoings and handle the consequences of your choices." Blight herself now let out a menacing growl as she blocked the nest with her whole body. Beside Tracker, one of his companions focused their gaze on the aggressive Flareon and caught a glimpse of one of the eggs just past her fur. "Tracker, there's an egg. It must have just been laid recently." The shadowed figure of Tracker took a step closer, attempting to peer around Blight, causing her to spit out some flames in retaliation. In the light of the fire, Tracker's white fur striped across the chest at an angle with red, and other red accents scattered about showed clearly to the on-edge couple. "You stay away from my babies," Blight shouted at the approaching Zangoose. Standing slightly taller than the Flareon, Tracker saw clearly the shapes of the 3 eggs. With the light of the fire, motioning with his hand, Tracker lowered his eyes in contemplation as he gave his order to his companions. "Capture the outlaws." As Team Respite handed off Blight and Chrome to Magnezone and his Magnemites, there to collect the wanted fugitives, Tracker sat cradling the 3 eggs in his arms. His eyes showed that his mind was wandering as he sat there. His 2 companions looked at one another before approaching him. "Tracker, what are we going to do about the eggs?" Looking up, Tracker met eyes with his Luxray teammate for a moment, before looking at the eggs again. "I'm not sure yet." The 3rd member of the group shook her head at the leader's indecisiveness. "I say we just drop them somewhere where the local Pokemon will break them. End their misery quicker, and save ourselves the hassle." Tracker raised his gaze again, sending a harsh glare at the Liepard who made the suggestion. "We will do no such thing, Chime. These eggs have every right to live as any other Pokemon." Chime huffed and flicked her tail in irritation. "They're the children of criminals, Tracker," she hissed back. "They should not be forced to carry the wrongdoings of their parents. They have done nothing to deserve what you are suggesting, and if we were to do so to the 3 innocent lives, we would be no better than the 2 Pokemon we just apprehended." Chime bit back what she was intending to respond after hearing that. "You're right. It's just... we've been chasing them for so long. They've done so much damage. I guess I'm being a bit biased." Flattening her ears against her head, Chime looked at the ground ashamed. After watching the 2 squabble, the Luxray spoke up. "What if we rehomed them? Remember the 3 groups we met during our time hunting down Blight and Chrome? None of them can have children naturally, easily, or willingly. We could always see if they are willing to adopt one of the eggs each. Tracker and Chime looked over at him with a look of shock. That just might work. Bite, you're brilliant. Tracker jumped to his feet, careful not to drop any of the eggs, and looked at Bite in wonder before coming to a quick decision. We will do just that. Chime nodded her head in agreement, beaming at Bite for having come up with the idea. The three decided to each take one of the eggs to the 3 different locations in which they met the Pokemon mentioned. Tracker would take 1 egg to the mossy forest, Bite would take another to the fog-shrouded basin, and Chime would take the last egg to the fairy light plains. The 3 set off together, as their paths would not split until about 3 days of traveling later. As they did so, they considered whether they should name the unhatched eggs, or to leave that up to the groups they were given to. After much consideration, they decided to name them, as there was a chance that any of the initial 3 groups may not want them after learning of their heritage. It would also give the siblings a way to find each other later on, should they be informed of the others' names and destinations. The one Tracker was taking was given the name Esper. Bite decided the egg he carried would bear the name Storm, and Chime decided the one in her care would be named Starlight. After they reached the end of their journey, together for the time being, the 3 wished each other luck and separated to take each egg to the decided destinations after agreeing to meet back up at their team's base. Tracker looked at the towering moss-covered pine trees that signaled he had made it to his destination. He had stopped at one of the towns on the way to use the Pelipper post office to deliver a letter to a pair of 2 Pokemon deep within the depths of this forest, informing them he was coming to visit with a little surprise in tow. He had not given them the background of the egg he carried, as he did not want them to turn it away immediately with a feel of bias, as Chime had tried to do upon first encountering the 3 eggs. Stepping past the tall, standing pines at the entrance, Tracker felt the air shift slightly, but in a way that was recognizable to him. Eyes going wide, Tracker cursed under his breath and took off at a sprint through the forest-turned dungeon. It had been fine when they had been here last, but it seems the ever-moving phenomenon had claimed this forest as its own. Having no clue how many floors he would have to make it through, he decided it would be best to avoid any potential encounters with inhabitants of the forest that weren't the ones he came to visit. This way he could keep Esper safe until they were delivered to their new potential family. Tracker finally reached his destination as the sun was nearly setting for the day. As he approached the grand and ancient oak standing tall at the center of the forest, moss covering the tops of all of its branches, he spotted a Pokemon pacing back and forth with anticipation and worry. He knew this Pokemon, especially as it was one of the 2 he had come to meet. He watched for a moment as they continued to pace, their green, leafy body rustling in the slight breeze as they walked one way before sharply turning on their hooves and going back the other way. Their horns glinted in the dying sunlight, and it was easy to tell that this go-goat had been here for a while from the worn-out patch of ground. Taking pity on the Pokemon, Tracker raised his voice to get their attention. "Hello, Aspen. It's been a while." The go-goat, Aspen, upon hearing Tracker's voice, spun around, nearly tripping themselves in the process. "It seems you have been faring well. How is your sister, Willow?" Aspen approached Tracker and inspected the egg he carried in his arms. "She is doing well. Currently, her health has started to improve. She had to take care of a dispute over by the lake in the depths, so she could not be here to greet you at this time. It seems your arrival was delayed a bit. Did the new dungeon that formed a while ago surprise you?" Tracker nodded his head to the question asked. "I did not expect in the short time we had not seen each other that a dungeon would form in the forest. It was a slight shock upon entering, but it wasn't the worst dungeon I've been through." Tracker adjusted his hold on Esper as he spoke with Aspen, and the small gesture had the go-goat watching the egg again. "Is this the egg you mentioned in your letter?" "Yes. While gender will not be known until it hatches, I will tell you that it is an Eevee egg. Before you and your sister decide to raise it, though, I must inform you of how I came to be in possession of this egg." Aspen looked up and met Tracker's gaze, as the tone used seemed hesitant. "Let us head back to the Hollow first, then. I am sure Willow is there now, and I feel we both should hear the explanation if a decision is to be made." Turning and leading the way back to their residence, Aspen started walking at a slightly brisk pace, somewhat impatient to Tracker's eyes. After a short travel, the two had arrived at the hollow in which Aspen and his older sister Willow resided. Aspen held aside the hanging lichen, with their horns waiting for Tracker to pass through before following behind him. Inside sat a skidoo of rare coloring compared to the others that resided in the forest. Glancing up at the noise, a smile bloomed across her face as she saw who had entered. "Aspen! Welcome home, and it seems you found Tracker. Chime and Bite aren't with you this time? I figured all three of you would come with the egg." Tracker returned a polite smile as he took a seat, cradling the egg to his chest. "Bite and Chime had to take this one's siblings elsewhere, so we split up for the time being, Willow." Willow's ears perked up slightly upon hearing this egg was not the only one before her eyes narrowed slightly. "If this is one of many, then I suppose there is a story behind why they are being separated, as well as why you've brought this one here." Tracker nodded and waited for Aspen to take a seat by their sister before beginning. "As you two know, Bite, Chime, and myself have spent the greater part of the last 5 years hunting down two outlaws, Blight and Chrome." Tracker paused, giving the two time to affirm his statement while gauging their response. "We finally came across them some days ago, and were able to arrest them after such a long time. At the time, we had thought they had only stopped to rest in a cave deep in the Avalanche Mountains, which we found out not to be the case after confronting them." Willow closed her eyes for a moment before casting her gaze on the egg in Tracker's arms. "If my guess is correct, that means this and the other eggs in Bite and Chime's care are the newly laid eggs of the two outlaws you have long been pursuing." Tracker flinched slightly at Willow's pointed words before letting out a sigh. "Yes, Esper here and their two siblings are children of Blight and Chrome. If you no longer wish to take the egg, I understand. I will try to—" "Now you wait just a moment. I never said we wouldn't take the egg in." Willow hurriedly stumbled to a standing position and stomped her front hooves towards Tracker. "I still very much wish to care for this egg, outlaw's child or not. You said its name is Esper. Was that given by their parents?" Shaking his head, Tracker scratched at his cheek, embarrassed. "No. Bite, Chime, and I were uncertain whether you or the other decided groups would all agree easily to taking them, so we wished to have a name they could all have to find each other later on, should you tell them about the others. The egg Bite has is named Storm and is being taken to the fog-shrouded basin, while the egg with Chime is named Starlight and is going to the Fairy Light Plains." Willow nodded before stepping forward and nuzzling the egg. "Aspen and I will do well to raise Esper and let her know of her heritage and siblings once she has grown enough to venture outside the forest." Turning to look at her sibling, Willow saw Aspen's eyes were continuously trained on Esper, with a hint of gentleness shining in their depths. "As you know, Aspen and myself will never have children of our own, so this may be our only chance to truly rear a young one." Tracker looked down as a surge of pity struck his heart. Willow, a shiny skidoo who carried a genetic disease preventing evolution. Sometimes it acted out and Willow would be bedridden for long periods of time, and a few times it had caused a scare for her life being lost. She has long wanted children, but the disease also caused her to be sterile, so the most she can do is watch over the children of the forest tenderly. As for Aspen, biologically male but not caring for gender roles since young, they had always been considered an oddball, having become the head of the skidoo herd of the forest after the tree at its center had deemed them worthy of evolution. Aspen stood as the sole protector of the herd. Aspen had no intent to sire a child of their own, but it was not a necessity, as the leader of the herd would be chosen through a successor trial. Tracker looked back and forth between the two with a sad expression. "I hope Esper can become a wonderful addition to your family, and that their childhood may be a happy one under your care." Standing up, he took the egg to a nest that had been prepared in the corner of the room and gently sat it down, running his hand gently over it one last time. "May our paths cross again in the future, Esper." Stepping back, he nodded to Willow and Aspen. "It is time I make my way home. I have a long journey ahead of me." Aspen rose to their hooves and walked over to Tracker, leaning their forehead against his. "Safe travels, friend. And thank you." Stepping back to their sister's side, Aspen met Tracker's gaze with eyes filled with happiness. Willow looked back and forth between her sibling and Tracker before giving a small nod of her own and turning to go settle in next to the egg. Making his way out of the hollow and casting his gaze to the sky, Tracker found a full moon staring back at him. He let out a gentle hum as the sight brought about an old legend to his mind. Gazing at the gently shining disk in the sky, Esper, may you and your siblings be bound by the moon, so that you may cross paths again, and share the same path when the time is right. Retrieving his gaze from the sky, Tracker began his trek back to his team's base with that single thought echoing in his mind.